This is part 3 in a series on motorized bicycles, and it came about in trying to figure out alternative transportation or personal transportation for when you go camping. What are the options? So it's part of a much bigger series, but this is part 3 on the motorized bicycle. I'll put a link here which will take you back to part 1 of the series. So if you've made it here to part 3 and you've seen 1 and 2, I'm super impressed, because most people won't make it this far. They'll think this is a little too crazy, a little too over the top, and yes, it is both of those things. So in this video, I'm gonna show you how to make this thing go a lot faster. I've already done some upgrades, some mods, and I'm gonna do some more, but I'm gonna tell you about all the things that you can do to it. I mean, if you got this far, you're really interested in doing this kit, or you've already done it, and you're looking at ways to improve it. When you're building it, I'll give you some building tips, and then we'll look at all the things you can do. We're gonna go over carburetor jetting, we're gonna go over heads, we're gonna go over exhaust, all those things. Okay, so let's say you bought the kit and you've got it basically assembled. Now in part 1, I definitely talked about the sprocket, so you can go back and watch that. That's an absolute thing you just got to do. You got to bite the bullet and buy a good sprocket, because if you're going to be adding more power, you've just got to be able to put it down, and you've got to work on reducing vibration. You can't take this thing to faster speeds if you're dealing with vibration. That vibration is going to damage the engine, the clutch, and it's also going to put too much stress on your welds and the bike, and these are pretty cheap, inexpensive bikes, so you want it to run as smooth as possible so you can get that power and not tear up anything. So I'm going to start here with the parts and do common mistakes people make when they assemble it. The number one mistake people make, other than putting on the rag joint improperly, is over tightening the bolts on the gas tank. I can't tell you how many videos I have watched with people who have their gas tanks duct taped to their frame, because these little bolts here, these little studs, are just welded to the bottom of the tank, and they break off pretty easy. So if you over tighten them, they will snap off while you're going down the road, and the bike back to the vibration will eventually, with too much stress on this, it'll break this stud here. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to tighten it. I put a little piece, I cut up a little bit of rubber mat and put a strip of rubber underneath here to kind of get it grippy. And then I tightened it to where I thought it was pretty snug, and move it to where it wouldn't move. And then it went down the road, and as I went down the road, it started tilting over, and I used my legs to hold it back together, come back and tighten it up. It took about 3 trips to get the tension on it to where it will stay on nice and tight. And then once you do that, make sure you put on a lock washer here, and then make sure you double nut it and tighten it, because the nuts that come with it will just come off. This is a lock nut I got down at Lowe's, and put that on there, and now that's not going to come undone. It's going to be done real well. The next thing people make mistake on is using the gas lines that come with it. They're terrible. Just go down to Lowe's, Home Depot, go to the mower department and get a gas line there. $10 will get you way more than you even need. You will need these little clamps, these little tiny clamps here, because just putting it on won't keep it on. The next thing you'll need to do when you assemble it is constantly checking all the bolts on the engine and making sure they're tight. One problem I did have was, this is your clutch in here, and it looks scary. It's really not. It's just 5 screws, and you can take this thing off. There's a big gear here, and there's a little gear here, and what happened on mine is there's a little screw right here that keeps the little gear on, and that one evidently was loose, and it ended up coming out, and it was just rattling around in here. It didn't cause any permanent damage, because both of these gears are press fit in so tight that screw really didn't do much being loose. Nothing came undone, but as that screw was rattling around in there, it started stripping the threads on it, and little pieces of metal accumulated around here. So I was able actually to screw that back in for now, and I've ordered another screw for that. Not critical, and I need to clean this out a little bit here. So that's just kind of one of those crazy things. These are cheap Chinese things, and so you just kind of got to keep on top of it. That's fun. Another thing is, I had a little problem with this fitting here, because some of these will require you to remove. See, look, this is already loose, and I already tightened it once. So some of them you have to remove this little piece here in order for it to stay on. Some of you don't. So don't really know, because that's got to stay on. If that's loose rattling around, I'm going to lose some spark. And this is your waterproof cover right here, make sure you've got that on. Make sure this will also need to be tightened. Don't make all these bolts too tight. Remember, it's cheap metal. Keep them snug, but not too tight. Also, when you're doing carb tuning, it's also nice. Just takes a few minutes to unscrew this, and you can look at your spark plug. And I'm going to put some videos. I'm going to do a whole library of videos down in the description. That's going to be a great reference for doing all sorts of things. I'll try to put one about, I'll put several about carb tuning that'll be helpful for you. Another big thing that comes up is the chain tensioner. So a lot of people get the spring one that mounts up here, and it helps with the vibration of the chain. I tried that early on but I had some vibration going on back here because I didn't have the sprocket right, and so I was getting a lot of chain jump. And what happened is when I put the springy one on, it just amplified the chain jump. So at certain speeds, this chain was just like a trampoline jumping around. And so I took it back off and I went back to the standard one. Always make sure this is incredibly tight, because one problem is this can, if it's loose, tilt back and it'll tear up your wheel. And so, but I've seen people to go, 40 plus, 50 plus, and they're still using this one here. It works well. I've gone back to this. Now that I've got things smoothed out, I may revisit that one. But also another thing is you can't have the chain too tight. You can't have the chain too loose. And I had to really play with that a lot because I was getting a lot of chain noise. So if you can see here, I can bounce that chain, this here and here. Now if I push this up, it's going to tighten up the whole chain, and there won't be much movement. If you're only getting this much movement in your chain, it's too tight. If it's flopping around all over the place, it's too loose. So this is just something you just got to play with, and you'll get it just right as you're going down the road. You'll hear the chain noise. So some other things you might want to buy is it comes with a 2-liter tank, which is pretty small. I went ahead and upgraded to the 3-liter tank. And as you I thought it would look a lot bigger, but it doesn't. And so, kind of looking back on it, I think maybe I could even gone up to the 4-liter, so about a 1-gallon tank. Okay, so this is another source of problems. So the one that comes with it, the cap that comes with it, is not a very good seal. It's still got to be vented because otherwise you get vapor lock, but it's so bad that when you fill up the tank, it'll splash out. So when I went up to this tank, actually it gave me a much better lid here. But I did see a video, I'll try to find it, where this guy just took an old inner tube and he pulled this rubber gasket off and just made several copies and cut out several gaskets like this, and just kept adding to the gasket to where he could still get venting, but he didn't get the splash. So that's one fix for it. When I got this gas tank, and I'll put a link to this one, this happened to come with a much better cap, and I have not had any trouble with it splashing. Now you got to watch your angle when you're mounting your gas tank, and something I didn't think about because this bike has a pretty good rake down here. So I can only fill the gas tank to approximately here. Otherwise, the gas is up in here and could splash. So I lose out on this much storage of gas, which is the big beefy part of this tank. So I get all this smaller part. So I just wasn't getting the distance I want. So that's why I went with a better tank. So something else that's very controversial is the boost bottle. And as I mentioned in part 1, this doesn't have anything to do with nitrous. You don't put nitrous on it. You're just going to blow up your engine. They can't handle it. So this is just basically an air expansion chamber. And I drilled a hole in my intake and installed it here. And when I put it on the stock kit, I saw a video on it. It was kind of promising. When I put it on the stock kit, it did allow me to reduce the idle way down, and I did immediately take it for a run on my test route, and I found about 2 extra miles per hour on the flat and about an extra 1.5 miles going uphill. So I did find a little bit of gain. But as I started tuning my carburetor, the original carburetor, my idle was just all over the place. I mean, it would just run up way high and then drop out. And so I was getting very frustrated with the situation, so I thought I need to take this out of the equation and just concentrate on the engine and the carburetor, and then I can come back and revisit this later. I mean, you can squeeze the tube while it's running, and all of a sudden the idle will it'll stall out, the idle will drop down, you let go and the idle comes back out. So it's doing something, and you can see the gas vibrating when it's running up and down here with the strokes. So it is doing something, but I don't know what happened. It worked pretty well for me for a while, and then I just got crazy erratic idle. I took it off, and then my idle went back to being calm and normal. So you can try this out if you want. They're not too expensive. but I just really haven't found it helpful for my situation. I might revisit it sometime in the future. All right, so you got it built. You're ready to get more power out of it. You already done your sprocket upgrade. You've checked all your bolts. Everything's going good. So the next cheapest way to get more power is the carburetor. You'll notice these carburetors come set pretty much rich because there's less chances there'll be engine damage if you put this on and it's running rich versus running lean. And that all sounds complicated, but it's not. So what happens is you're going to want to tune your carburetor. Now the carburetor that comes on it is okay. It will do the job, and I've used it up until this point and it's been okay. There's a lot of things that can be improved from this carburetor, and I'll show you that in a minute. But problems with this carburetor is on the intake here, where the intake tube goes in right here, no matter what you do, you're never going to get a perfect seal. You can do pretty well, but I had the occasion where they would, after riding for quite a while, I would have a little bit of gas engine right here. It wasn't much, but you're never going to get a perfect seal based on how this is designed with these little gaps right here. And it's real hard to tighten this up and not strip this screw, so that's a drawback. Also, one thing when you're starting it for the first time and you're trying to get gas into it, you can push this about 25 times and that'll fill your bowl with gas. This screw right here, some people think that this is for adjusting it for lean and rich. It doesn't. I've checked that out. This is strictly to adjust the idle. And another problem with this is you can't really adjust it with finger tightness. You have to have a screwdriver do it, which is really annoying when you want to stop on the side of the road and adjust it. Also, I had a hard time just maintaining an idle. I would adjust it, and then 10 minutes later, an hour later, the next time I drive it, the idle would be all wacky again. All right, so another way that people will show you to adjust, let's see. Oh yeah, there's one other thing. I would occasionally get some gas coming out of this. So it somehow was backing up into the air filter and would come out sometimes right here. So I didn't like that. So it'll work. Oh, and the bowl is prone to leaking because in the bowl here, you have a gasket, and this one is made out of cork. And it kind of shrinks and swells, and you can, I don't know if you can see right here where it's gotten pinched. And so occasionally people get leaking from the gasket right here in the bowl. So all of that to say is there's a better carburetor, but let me go over adjusting this carburetor, because you can get really far with just this one, and I played with it a lot. The first way people will show you to adjust the lean and rich. So if it's running rich, what you'll hear is when you get it up into the top 2/3 of the throttle, it'll kind of go yee, and then it'll start going. So that's kind of called four-stroking, or it's only firing on every fourth stroke instead of every other stroke. So that's a waste of fuel and a waste of a lot of, you're only getting half the power. So one thing you want to do is adjust that. And so one way to do it is people show you is the needle that's in here. When you went to install this, you found that there was a needle in here. And watch out, there's a spring in here. It can really jump around. So if you pull that out, don't worry about me getting this dirty because I'm not going to be using it again. But you definitely want to keep this clean when you're working on it. Okay, so I finally got the little pin out here, and what I want to show you is this comes out of this piece here, and there's little notches on this, and this little clip can be moved up and down, and you can change it a little bit. But what I'm going to do, what I found best, is go ahead and do the big jetting first, and then maybe later on you could go back and fine tune this one. But once you change this out, it changes the whole range. So I didn't find any use for changing this, and I just put it back to the stock setting. And when you put this thing back together, I did make a mistake once. I put that little Pac-Man clip, I put it in first and then put in the pin. It doesn't. The pin goes in first and then the Pac-Man clip, because that spring has to sit on top of that Pac-Man clip to keep it from jumping up and down like this. So that was one little mistake I made, because all of a sudden I put it back together and I'm like, something is not right. Also, this will go back into the sleeve. You'd think it only goes in one way, but it'll actually go in two ways. And what'll happen is if you put it in the wrong way, your throttle won't work. You'll go to pull the throttle and there'll be no movement on the throttle, because it kind of fits in also this way over here. And somehow I messed that up one time. So you want to make sure you get this in the proper way. So let me show you the way that really works. And it's just, don't waste your time doing it that way. I just didn't do much at all for me. So you want to adjust the jets. And the way you do it is you just take this bowl off, and there's a little floaty thing in here, and you just undo the 2 screws. And you can even do this on the bike if you can get access to the screws. You take this off and be sure and shut your gas tank off and try to drain as much gas from the line. There's also a neat little screw right here that should let you drain the gas out here. But you're going to get some gas on you. It's just the way it is. So what happens is when you open this up, you're going to see this little piece here, and there's going to be a little jet on it. And here is a bag of jets, and I'll put a link here so you can get a pack. I went ahead and got a pack that jumps by 5s. So I think it starts at 60 and went up to 80 by 5s because I just didn't know what I needed. So you can see they're just little teeny screws with tiny little holes. Don't do the thing people show you where drill a hole and solder it. You're gonna foul it up, and then you're not gonna be able to ride your bike until you get another set of these in the mail. And these little screws just go in here. So what I did is I started with the biggest one, so the richest setting, because I think that's the best way to start. I started with the biggest one. I put it in and I rode a standard circuit where I had wide open throttle and uphill and downhills. And then I would come up and I would move down one, and I would move down one. So I started, I think, at 80, and the one that worked out for me, because I'm at 2,000 feet up, the one that worked for me ended up being the 65. Now, what you can do is if you really are going to go for it and you're really going for higher speeds and really getting into this, then you can buy a set of these that goes up by single digits. So I might want to get a set now that goes from 55 to 65. However, when I add my exhaust and when I change the sprocket and all, I may need to adjust it again. So these are really cheap, really easy. So you just screw it in here. Now when you go to unscrew them, usually this will come off too. Don't worry, that's fine. So this little stock here will come off. It just screws back in. So you can just finger tighten that one, and then you put your jet in, and then take your flathead and just screw it in nice and tight. You have to screw it all the way flush. I made that mistake and things didn't work out. So this is what one of them looks like. It's just little screws. So I'm being very clean with these because I want to reuse these. You've got to be very clean and not get anything in the bowl, because this hole is so tiny. If you get anything in it, it's going to clog up the card. So that just screws right into here. Tighten that down. Oh no, and I just dropped it. That was bad. Well, I'll blow it out and make sure it's clean. But anyway, make sure you tighten it all the way down to where it's flush. I didn't tighten mine always down and it didn't work quite right. So tighten that down all the way flush. So as you're driving each time, you're going to know it's going to be really boggy on the big one. You're not going to get any speed. It's going to be very boggy. So, but as you work down to smaller jets, you're going to pick up speed, and all that thing's going to start hitting on every other stroke, and you're just going to go a lot faster and have a lot more speed, and it's really amazing. And when you go too far, it won't feel right. You'll feel that perfect spot where it needs to be. So let's show you a better way to go with the carburetor. So this is the better carburetor. I'll put a link to it. It's not expensive. $15 plus or minus, and it's a far better carburetor. I initially bought this, and then I put it away and didn't put it on because I watched a couple of videos, where people put these on and they said, I didn't get any extra power, I didn't get any extra speed. In fact, it was even worse. Well, I found out why that's true, because I got real frustrated with mine, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I went ahead and put it on. Man, am I happy with this thing. First off is it doesn't leak anywhere. You have a much better seal right here that goes all the way around. There's none of those little gaps. You have a big Allen head screw here that pulls this in tight. I love that. This is your idle screw, and you can turn it with your finger, no problem. This has a rubber bowl. When you open it up, it looks just like the other one inside. This comes down, there's a little float, and then you put the exact same jets in there. So if you buy jets for the other one, you'll have jets for this one. And so it has a rubber gasket versus that cork thing, so you're not going to have leaks there. And the air filter just looks way cooler. It is a little bit bigger, so I do have this offset pipe to get it out to the side. Now, and I haven't gotten any problems with it. So what the deal is, again, so if you had adjusted your carb, your old carb to where you liked it, and then you put this one on, yes, it's going to be worse, because they've set it back to be more rich, so you're going to have to rejet it. And the great thing is, I don't know if I get any extra power, but I'm telling you, it's so much less aggravation. It works so much better, and once it's on, it does its job. It doesn't leak. It does what it's supposed to do. Now, the advantage is later on, we're going to talk about exhaust and talk about sprocket, changing sprocket sizes. This is going to be way easier, way better to adjust as you're bringing up the speed than that old one. So what I can do is I just undo this screw I take off my fuel line here and I just twist it, and I can pull this, take this off, and I can change the jets there. So it's really simple and fast. All right, so once you've done that, you got your sprocket, you've got your carb, and you've tuned your carb. Now you should be getting 30 miles an hour plus pretty easy. 30, 32, 33. You should be able to get up in that speed. So let's say you want to take it up another notch. You want to get up, let's say in the high 30s, low 40s. So what you're going to have to do is, this is only a 1.5 horsepower engine. So what you're going to need to do is go with the bigger sprocket, which we talked about. I mean, smaller sprocket, which we talked about in part 1. However, the drawback is when you go to a smaller sprocket, you're going to get a higher top end speed, but you're going to lose your low end torque. So it's not a great solution. But here's a way to fix that. What you're going to want to do, well, let's do the upgrades that really don't help at this point before I tell you the secret. Going with the higher compression head is a bad idea at this point. You're not going to get any extra power. In fact, you're going to lose your top end speed. You'll get some low end torque, lose the top end speed, but you're also going to run the risk of banging your piston up against this head when you try to shorten it down and get more compression, because the tolerances and designs of these just aren't that good. So hold off spending any money right here. What we're going to do is I'm first going to buy a new exhaust pipe, because this is the quietest pipe, but it also robs a lot of power. Some people just undo the bottom and take it out. You will get some more power, but it is going to be some kind of crazy loud, and I don't want to upset my neighbors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a video. It's an excellent video by Bikeberry where they've compared all the different exhausts, and it's a really good study. And I'm going to put a little graphic up here that's going to show you why you want to change the exhaust. So if you look at this chart, first thing you're going to be drawn to is top speed versus stock. And I can tell you right off, look at the numbers. You're not getting any higher top end speed. So first you would think, well, that's a waste of money. But the column we want to look at in order to get more speed and power is the far right one, which is acceleration, 0 to 20 acceleration. Look at the difference in those numbers. You know, it goes down by half. You're picking up much more low end torque and power, which is exactly what we're missing to change over to the smaller sprocket. So you really need to do these things in tandem. So what I'm going to do is I decided I do want the quieter one. So their best one was the poo-poo exhaust. Yes, it's poo-poo. Poo-poo exhaust that's got the flexible exhaust. And they're about $60. I'll put a link here. They're kind of all over the place. But I like that one. So that's going to get me a lot more low-end torque to get me going, because since being in the mountains, I need it. And so I'm going to mount it here. I like that it's a flexible pipe. So I'm going to run the flex down here. I'm going to put it pretty low, kind of, not showing out, and just putting it back here nice and low. So that will do that, and then I'll tune it up, and then I'm going to get the 30, probably, I think I got about a 36 tooth. This is a 44. I think I've got a 36 already, and I'll have to get another chain, because I don't want to change this chain size in case I want to go back to the sprocket. So I'll have to order a new chain. I'll put on the new sprocket, and I'll adjust the chain to that sprocket, and I'm hoping that should get me, I know it's going to get me a lot more power, and that exhaust will help me get up to speed. And then once I'm up to speed, that sprocket will just take me faster. So that's going to be a fun way to upgrade this. So there's an upgrade pass. Now I'll try and find some videos where people have taken this thing above 50 miles an hour, and there's actually a couple videos of a guy doing 70, but they don't show his setup, so I don't know how he did it. So now the next step, let's say you've done what I've done and you want to go farther. You're like addicted to this thing. You're completely and totally insane and have a death wish. Okay, you can buy, when you get to that point, you just want to buy a different kit. Don't buy a piston kit. Don't buy a big bore kit. It's not going to work. So what you want to do is you want to buy a whole new engine. And one of my favorite ones are the Zeda engines, and there's this company, Zeda Motorsports, and they have a lot of videos, and I love watching them because they are the only company out there that will post horsepower figures for their engines, because they actually dyno them. They have videos of them dynoing them. So I feel that they're very accurate. And they have, I'll put the link to the website, very cool website. They sell some stuff on Amazon. I'll put some links there. But go to the website. I mean, they have engines that go up to $350. They have engines that go up to 5 horsepower and more. So this is 1.5 horsepower. They take this same engine, they open it up, they port it, they polish it, they put in better parts, better piston, better crank. They just really work the engine. And with a pipe, exhaust pipe, they're getting 5 horsepower out of these setups, which is just insane. And that's how you're getting up into 50 plus miles per hour. The kits, you could actually, I think they have a pretty decent kit there for about $250. I think was a really neat one, a pretty good value for that. And I like getting the whole kit instead of just the engine, because you'll have spare parts of everything, and something from your old kit might not be fit on the new kit, because the company that makes, there's all kinds of companies in China that are making these, and each company does things a little differently. So I would go with the whole kit. But my plans are simply to do the sprocket and do the exhaust, and be able to hit about 35, 37 if I want to, without the thing just falling apart, so that I can cruise real slow, real RPMs, real low, and real smooth, cruising at 25 to 30 miles per hour. So that's kind of my goal right now. So I hope you have enjoyed this and found a lot of this information helpful on taking this thing to insane levels. So this ends the series right now on the motorized bicycle. So I think I'm going to jump back and do some electric stuff now. So the next series I'm going to do is on electric skateboards. And I haven't ridden a skateboard in many, many, many years, but a lot has changed in the industry with the longboards, the electric skateboards. They're amazing for transportation, and I'm just learning how to do it. So I'm hoping you'll join me in that series, and it should be pretty funny watching me try to learn how to ride a skateboard as an adult. But I've taken it out a couple times, and I've had an absolute blast with it. So I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you'll keep with the series, and I'll see you next time.